This morning when I woke up, my alarm clock wakes me up to NPR, and because basically it's either NPR or Rush Limbaugh, right, here in Washington D.C. In downtown D.C. there are no progressive stations you can listen to. We Act Radio is on, but they're working on cranking up their signal to throw it into DC, and anything that, if you're one of their listeners, anything you can do to help, please do, because it would be great to get good progressive radio. But anyhow, I'm listening to NPR, and these two guys are talking, and I was half asleep, so I don't remember their names, but it was it was an NPR host and an NPR commentator. And they were talking about how, the most important issue that Americans care about, one of them said, and in fact, actually, Louise told me that after I had left home and come into work, she was watching MSNBC and saw a very similar conversation on MSNBC where the host said, "What's the most important issue of the day?" And the guest said, "ISIL." Or ISIS, or, whatever. I'm calling it ISIL now. And on NPR, they were having this conversation. Americans are afraid of terrorism. Americans are afraid of ISIL. And this is a real problem. And then just kind of parenthetically, just in passing, one of these two idiots on NPR this morning, one of these two hosts on NPR this morning said, well, Bernie Sanders, words to the effect of, this is, I'm paraphrasing here. Words to the effect of, well, Bernie Sanders, this is not his issue. He really doesn't have much to say about ISIS or ISIL. And so what's his strategy? And they just kind of agreed, well, he's just going to keep his head down and hope that the Americans once again become concerned about the economy. Like Bernie's a single issue guy, which is nonsense. And promoting the idea that Bernie's unelectable. The fact of the matter is that Bernie Sanders, in the general election matchup in multiple polls, beats all the Republicans more handily than Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton doesn't even beat Marco Rubio, whereas Bernie does. Bernie is the most electable of the two, according to the polls right now. Keeping in mind, that means probably, very little relative to a year from now when the elections are going to be held, or, 11 months from now. But in any case, it got me thinking, if, the first thought was, why is it that both NPR, which is heavily funded by the defense industry, I mean, we hear PSAs, at least here in Washington, D.C., all the time for defense contractors, and you get on NPR regularly, you get these so-called experts from places like the American Enterprise Institute and right-wing think tanks that are funded by the defense industry. So is NPR, which is funded by the defense industry, and is MSNBC, part of NBC, which is funded heavily by the defense industry? I mean, you see ads on there for McDonnell Douglas and fighter jets and all kinds of cool stuff. Hey, you want to buy a tank? I don't think so. Why are you running this ad? Oh, you want to influence the network's coverage. And they're both basically promoting this idea that what Americans are all, quote, afraid of is terrorism. Terrorists have not killed anywhere near as many people as have died from lack of health insurance in the United States. That's around, 15 to 20,000 people a year right now. It's 40,000 people a year before Obamacare. So you could argue that the Republicans who have for the last 60, since Harry Truman proposed, actually since the Teddy Roosevelt proposed single payer health care for the United States, for the entire country. The terrorists have been the Republican Party who have obstructed that, although the Republicans were in favor of it during the Teddy Roosevelt administration. It was Democrats who opposed it. How things change. But then FDR didn't explicitly propose that. He proposed health care as a right. It was Harry Truman who proposed a single-payer health care system. That got shot down. So, if Americans want to be afraid of something, it makes much more sense to be afraid of getting sick in the United States than getting shot by a terrorist, number one. Number two, your odds of getting shot by a right-wing terrorist are higher than those of a Muslim terrorist. So why are we all hysterical about Muslim terrorists? Number three, our school districts are being shut down. How is this going to play into the be afraid, be afraid? Here's the larger point, the large frame within which I'm making all these comments is that if the media can make the election about national security and who's going to kick the butt of the evil guys in the Middle East more effectively, then Republicans win. If, on the other hand, the conversation is, how does America create a world at peace? How do we have a foreign policy that's a reasonable, rational foreign policy that stabilizes the world? And how do we deal with the things that are really terrifying Americans? Fewer than half of Americans are in the middle class any longer. It's, we've lost, a fifth of our middle class since Reaganism started. I'll bet you that's keeping a hell of a lot more people, waking them up at 3 o'clock in the morning, staring at the ceiling, going, "Oh my God, how am I going to pay the bills tomorrow?" I'll bet millions more Americans wake up in the middle of the night with that thought than waking up in the middle of the night going, "Oh my God, tomorrow I've got to go to work and maybe a disaffected Muslim terrorist is going to come in and shoot us up." Like the guy in San Bernardino. I frankly doubt that there's anybody or very many people who are so terrified of that. But the media, oh boy. Or climate change. Is there going to be a conversation about climate change in tonight's Republican debate? The Republican Party is the only political party in the world that denies climate change. Because it's the only political, but we're one of the only countries in the world that allows corporations like Koch Industries and ExxonMobil to own politicians and to buy public opinion. And they have said essentially to their politicians, obviously, or it certainly looks this way from the outside, you either deny climate change or you're not going to get reelected. You're not going to get any money. Money in politics. I'm frankly more afraid is the wrong word, but or not quite the right word. I'm more concerned about the damage that money in politics is doing to my nation and to small d democracy in our small r republic than I am about ISIL on any day of the week. And corporate rule. We've got corporations running this country, running your life and my life. When was the last time you tried to get your health insurance company to actually pay one of the damn bills they're supposed to pay? Or you tried to get through to your cable company, or you tried to get through to your phone company, or you tried to get through to, fill in the blanks. Try to make a doctor's appointment. I tried that about a month and a half ago, and I've gotten my appointments next week. In the United States, it's damn hard to get a doctor's appointment these days, especially in places like Washington, D.C. And that's just for routine stuff. So what are the real threats? And what are the threats that will not even be touched, will not even be discussed in the Republican debate tonight? Instead, it's going to be, how many of us are waking up in the middle of the night being afraid that, somebody down the street might have an abortion? Or, they might close the gun show loophole. We can't allow that. What concerns you?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
What are the issues that the media really should be focusing on instead of this constant terror porn? Back with your calls. To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.